So you want to know if the Giga Chat Dr.Ratio is a good investment.
Yeah.
Dr.Ratio is 1000% a unit you would want to invest in, but I will discuss in depth whether or not I recommend you should invest in Dr.Ratio. Dr.Ratio is a single target hunt type character, meaning that he excels in attacking single targets and does not have AoE built-in damage. One amazing thing about Dr.Ratio is that he does the most single target damage out of anyone in the game. This includes the likes of Seal and Lunay/Jingliu, although those two aren't single target characters. And another interesting factor is that Dr.Ratio is an imaginary type DPS. Currently, the only other free imaginary character is Yukong. Due to this, not many people have type coverage for imaginary, in which case would be incredibly helpful for this Memory of Chaos. If you're having trouble with Memory of Chaos 11 or 12, or just Memory of Chaos in general, you absolutely want to invest in Dr.Ratio. Both stages 11 and 12 have one phase where imaginary type excels in, but there is one other factor to consider when using Ratio, and that is he needs support in the form of debuffs. Dr.Ratio's entire kit is centered on debuffs. For example, each debuff gives him a 20% increase in chance to launch a follow-up attack, meaning you at the very least want 5 debuffs on the enemy to guarantee that 100% chance. But Dr.Ratio's Trace, Summation, gives a crit rate/crit damage increase of 2.5 and 5, respectively, stacking up to 6 times. This means that if the enemy you attack has 6 debuffs, he can get an increase of 15 crit rate and 30 crit damage. Some partners you could consider to trigger these debuffs are any DOT applier, for example, Guinaifen Sampo. These are the ones that I recommend for DOT, but you can also use units like Silverwolf, Pela, and Welt. Out of all these units, I would have to give the best in slot to Silverwolf, due to the vast quantity of debuffs she applies just by existing. But Pela and Welt work just fine too. Welt especially due to his same type, meaning you could run Panacony on Welt, which will in turn give Dr.Ratio one more source of a buff. For farming Dr.Ratio, I have some tips of things that you should avoid. There is a
They came to me in my dreams
set coming up for Dr.Ratio that is better than any current set we have for Ratio, but to be honest, if your current banditry/quantum set is good enough, don't force yourself to farm the new
In-Dream
domain. Currently, the best set for Dr.Ratio is the 4-piece Wastelander of Banditry Desert, and the best planar is Inert Salsado/Glamoth, but I think Salsado takes the overall win for building Ratio, as it just gives him crit rate and buffs his already monstrous ult/follow-up attacks. You also want to run a crit damage chest piece on Dr.Ratio because you will lose out on damage if you run a main stat crit rate, but I mean if you have a godly crit rate piece with all rolls into crit damage for some reason, that can definitely work. Ratio's kit and traces, and if you run Salsado, altogether pretty much give him a crit rate of 50% without relics taken into account. You just want to get a decent amount of crit rate into his substats, at least 20 to 30% total. Also, Dr.Ratio does want speed boots due to him not needing a abundance of skill points to function, but you could also run attack percent, just use whichever piece has better substats to be honest. So, to now answer the main question, do you need an imaginary type DPS for MOC or general gameplay? Then yes, absolutely invest in Dr.Ratio. Do you already have someone like Imbibitor Lunay majorly invested in and have no interest in Dr.Ratio or using him? Then do not invest in him, but I do recommend everyone level 20s him and descends him for the free ticket. Do you just think Dr.Ratio is fucking awesome and is fucking awesome and that he is fucking awesome? Then go for it. Now, to answer the real question of today, should you summon for Dr.Ratio Bathtub?
Yeah.
But to answer more in depth, you should consider what Lycones you already have. If you have Swordplay S5, then you most likely don't need to consider it. Hell, even S1 works, but obviously Dr.Ratio's Lycone sweeps. Obviously though, the Herta S5 Lycone is just fine as well, cruising in the Stellar Sea. But there's one thing. Dr.Ratio's Lycone is cracked, though. At S1, it increases crit damage by 20, as well as increasing crit damage by 6 based on the number of debuffs the enemy has, up to 3 stacks. So basically, another 24% crit damage. And when using an ultimate, they give the enemy a debuff called Disputation, which is fucking insane, and increases damage dealt by 36%. Just a flat 36% damage boost, and to top it off, with Disputation, Dr.Ratio's follow-up attacks
Ignore 20% defense!
lasting for 2 turns. To be honest, this Lycone is insane, so if you want it, I would say go for it, but I only recommend if your account is not missing unit coverage. Like for example, if you don't have a major damage dealer like Jingliu, I suggest you invest in that instead. But go have fun. Thank you for watching this video, and I really hope it helps you make your decision on whether or not you want to invest in Dr.Ratio. Obviously, trace mats are pretty pretty scarce in Star Rail due to the amount of units we need to invest in. But I would say Dr. Ratio is 1000% one of those units you should invest in most of the time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Drawlick out.